Story 1. I once choked down some very salty soup at a friend's house just to be polite. Felt like I was drinking the ocean. Story 2. A vegan Thanksgiving, but it was not prepared well. Everything had the consistency and flavor of a wet loaf of bread. Story 3. An acquaintance of mine was served sauerkraut lasagna at a friend's place. Story 4. A little girl once offered me an empty teacup after pretending to fill it with a toy kettle. I drank it nonetheless and complimented her on a very fine tea. 0 flavor 0 out of 10. Wholesome moment 10 out of 10. Story 5. Bland, undersalted chicken soup made from a whole chicken, with flabby skin and chunks of cartilage in it. I was 11, staying at my friend's house for a sleepover. She was picking around the gross bits, and her stepfather said she was going to clean her plate or I had to go home and she would get a punishment. She started crying and eating, so I ate all that unpleasant food too in solidarity. Story 6. Not a house but a Chinese cafe I worked at in Canada. The owner's parents managed to smuggle styrofoam cups of food from Hong Kong. They gave me one and stood waiting for me to eat it. It looked like seaweed and lentils, tasted like dirt. I faked a smile, said thank you, and took it home, leaving it in the fridge. My mom found it and scolded me for being such a picky eater. Then she took a spoonful and ate it. I watched her grimace and turn green. I still don't know what I was eating. Story 7. Have you ever gone to a friend's house to eat and the food just was not good? I mean, the macaroni was soggy, the peas were mashed, and the chicken tasted like wood. So you try to play it off like you can by saying that you are full. Then your friend says, "Mama, he is just being polite. He is not finished." That is not true. Your heart starts pumping, and you think of a lie, so you say that you already ate. Your friend says, "There is plenty of food." So you pile some more on your plate. While the smelly food is steaming, your mind starts dreaming of the moment when it is time to leave. Then you look at your plate and your chicken is slowly rotting into something. Story 8. Grew up poor and was invited to a wealthy children's seafood boil party. I had never eaten fresh, unshelled shrimp before. I ate 2 whole crunchy shrimp, including the shell, head, eyes, and legs, before someone saw me and told me I was eating it incorrectly. Story 9. This was in the early 1990s. I was about 11 or 12. My friend from church invited me over to her house for lunch, and my parents agreed. I rode with her family back to her house, and thus my gastronomic nightmare began. First of all, her mom was not only obese but extremely obese and very dirty. Being the early 1990s, she was the only obese person I knew. Unfortunately, she had that gross, sweaty, cheesy, soured but almost sickeningly sweet, obese person smell in spades, and I was not used to that. Also, her dad was literally around 80 years old and had his own old person smells, and her little brother was about 3 and still not potty trained, so I had to breathe through my mouth to keep from gagging the whole ride there. Upon entering her house, I knew unequivocally that I had made a mistake. But she was my friend, and I did not want to embarrass her, so I held my tongue. Her house was a hoarded-out nightmare. I do not know how anyone got around in that place without falling or causing an avalanche of clothes and boxes. The only room I saw in the entire house that was even remotely clean was my friend's bedroom. She did not keep it absolutely spotless, but it was very nearly so for a middle school-aged girl. So we hung out in her little sanctuary for an hour or so while her mom prepared lunch and called everyone to the table. The table was covered on top by an array of newspapers, fly swatters, and moldy coffee mugs, with everyone's plates nestled among them. Underneath the table, buzzing with a cloud of flies, was a fetid, eye-stinging, overflowing cat box. Throughout the meal, her ancient, drooling father kept swatting flies and cockroaches on the table and then flicking them off the side. To top the whole mess off, her mom used store-bought jar sauce and mixed it into way too much pasta. The whole thing was a gloopy, watered-down, tasteless mess. I took a few polite bites but then declared myself full because of a very large breakfast. I thought the garlic bread was safe enough, so I ate a couple pieces of that. After that meal, we went outside and played in dirty stock tank water. Her family kept cows for an hour or so until her mom drove me home. I immediately took a shower, changed clothes, and ate my mom's lunch leftovers. Please note, I am not saying all obese people smell bad. I am not. But obese people who do not bathe properly can have a smell that is different from that of a non-obese person who also has not bathed properly. Folds of skin can collect smells. Story 10. I ate French toast that was just toasted bread done in a toaster with syrup. Nothing was dipped in egg. Nothing was grilled. It was just toasted bread and syrup. I think I am still a bit traumatized. Story 11. My aunt made spaghetti with chicken, marinara sauce, and canned spinach. I am not a fan. I do not know if it was how she cooked it, but I did not like it. Story 12. Former mother-in-law cooked turkey until the meat pulled back from the drumsticks into a hard red ball. The white bone was exposed about halfway down. She was not going to serve until the last child showed up for Thanksgiving. No one was in a hurry, as her cooking was bad. The turkey was like jerky. She also cooked frozen green beans at a rolling boil for 30 minutes until they became mush. In a previous year, she cooked the turkey in a roasting bag until it collapsed into a heap. Literally, the chest cavity gave up. Do not miss family meals at her house. Not one bit. Story 13. Hello there. I'll eat pretty much everything put in front of me because my parents did not tolerate picky eaters. The only 2 times in 62 years that I could not eat were: first, spaghetti and sauce cooked, using the term charitably, in a microwave. Yes, we are talking raw spaghetti noodles cooked in sauce in a microwave. And second, blood sausage or pudding. I tried, I really did, but no, I just could not do it. Story 14. My grandparents couldn't taste anymore but didn't know it. Grandma asked if I wanted any milk with lunch. At that point in my life, I almost never drank milk because of mild lactose intolerance and not liking it. But what the heck, I hadn't had any in a few years, so I decided to give it a try. The milk was chunky, curled, and horrifically sour. I drank it as fast as I could to get it over with because I didn't have the heart to tell them. She offered me more, but I politely said, "No thank you, that was plenty." I never touched milk again. Story 15. I went to a party at a friend's house when I was in my early 20s. They thought shrimp cocktail was made from raw shrimp. I did not eat it. Some people did. I am surprised no one got violently ill from that. Story 16. I was at a close friend's house who prefers food much spicier than I do. He offered me a bowl of chili. I took one bite and started sweating profusely from my hairline and forehead, my glasses getting wet from the sweat streaming down. I guzzled the half of a beer left in my can, took a second bite, then immediately drank half a beer, trying to put out the fire in my mouth. After about 4 bites, I gave up. It didn't taste bad, but the ghost pepper heat was way too much for me. It was the worst food just based on the Scoville rating. 45 years later, we're still best friends, but thankfully, he learned to cook to suit the taste of his guests very soon after that. Story 17. A friend of mine is Italian, and her husband is English. The first time she met his parents, they tried to show off their cooking skills by making her lasagna. However, instead of minced meat, they used sliced Spam. She was horrified. Story 18. There was a neighborhood kid who was so excited to have me over to play one summer day. I quickly learned why she was so excited. Her parents were incredibly strict, to the point of being terrifying. We played outside all day and had a great time. Then came lunchtime. Her dad set down 2 glasses of milk, my nemesis, and egg salad sandwiches. Swimming in mayonnaise. Dear God, this was hell on earth to my 7-year-old self. I would have rather gone hungry than choke down those 2 items. I tried to politely decline, but then my friend said her dad gets mad if food is wasted. So down the hatch they went. I spent most of the night in the bathroom. Glad her father was placated, though. Story 19. A friend made stuffed pasta shells. I was excited to try them because she was always a really good cook. Her recipe was unique. They had mayonnaise in them. I had never tasted anything so horrible. I managed to eat one before saying I was full from a big lunch. Story 20. Pistachio jelly. 3 helpings. A school friend, Armenian, had a birthday party for which her mother went all out cooking the most incredible Middle Eastern feast. The kids only wanted chicken and chips and made a scene. The mother was beside herself, thinking she'd ruined her daughter's chances of making friends. I did what my mother taught me, so I ate what I was given and told her how much I loved it. It was delicious. She had made pistachio jelly. I hate jelly and colorful desserts. It's an autism thing. They genuinely make me feel unwell. I ate my portion. She asked if I liked it, and I politely said yes, so she refilled my plate. And again, luckily, my mother came to pick me up before I could get a fourth plate. The mum called mine the next day to say how well behaved I was. My mother made me my special birthday cake on my non-birthday, and I regularly find a little joke pot of green jelly in my Christmas stocking. So all's well that ends well. I still detest pistachio green jelly. Story 21. I have eaten some steaks that were turned into hockey pucks. They should have been considered crimes. I am a big-time steak snob. I buy my steaks from a specific market that sources them from a specific farm. I have my cooking process down to a science and nail it every time. So when someone gives me a supermarket steak cooked to high heaven, it hurts my soul. Story 22. A vegetarian version of a meatloaf I cannot stand either. Story 23. Well, we have a dish in my country, especially in my city, called gali mahi. Once, I went to my uncle's house and they had it, but I could barely eat it. It seemed like everything in it was raw, including the herbs which should have been fried. It also seemed like they did not season it at all. I was very hungry in their house until we got back home. Story 24. For all the great meals my French grandmother made, she would serve those little gray mushy peas from a can, le sueur. We would refer to them as sewer peas. Story 25. First boyfriend. I was 17, he was 18. His parents allowed me to sleep over in the spare room. At dinner, I was served a full trout, skin on, head on, baked with the eye. Joke's on me. I'm sure it was unintentional and a very nice fish. But that gross, milky fish eye and baked head still haunts my dreams. I politely ate as much as I could. I'm vegetarian now. Gross. Story 26. Burned pizza. The crust was black for real. I would never serve that. Story 27. Boiled cabbage. I hate cabbage in any form. I went to help a friend with his well. His wife cooked lunch, cabbage, his favorite, with lots of salt and pepper. I got through it. Story 28. When I was in college, I worked at a physical therapy department in a hospital. The Saturday crew was composed of 85% college students. There were 7 of us and our boyfriends or girlfriends, making a nicely sized group. We would have parties, taking turns hosting at our apartments. The host would make dinner, and the rest of us would bring drinks, appetizers, and desserts. One guy of Irish descent hosted once and made an Irish stew that he said was his mother's recipe. It was the most disgusting thing I have ever eaten. I had never had Irish stew before or since the party, but any other stew I have tried had brown gravy. This stew was white and so thick it was hard not to gag. The meat was mostly gristle. He had boiled potatoes that were terribly undercooked and underseasoned. We took him out of the rotation because no one wanted to be subjected to that again. Story 29. Oversalted kidney beans were served as a side dish. I was staying overnight with an elementary school friend, and when I said that I couldn't eat them, the mother told me to let my friend finish them. She was already struggling with her own, so I forced them down. I ended up vomiting a few hours later, and the mother made me drink a communal capful of Pepto-Bismol liquid. I was pretty sure it was coming right back up too, but I managed to breathe through it. I was glad to go home in the morning. Story 30. White man here married to an Asian woman. When I visit there, I have tried fish heads, chicken feet, and overly spicy soups to please her family, but I have been told that my facial expressions reveal my discomfort. Story 31. My Russian tutor worked out of her house, and she often had fruit out for us, which is apparently a Slavic hospitality custom. She also had an uncanny ability to find the ripest, juiciest, most intense fruit, despite shopping at the same grocery store we did. This was great until she put out a plate of cantaloupe. If I liked cantaloupe, this would have been the best I had ever tasted, but it always made me gag no matter how bland it was, and this was not bland. I loved this woman and was not going to be rude, so I choked down the entire plate. I was almost in tears from suppressing my gag reflex. I would do it again. Story 32. I was invited to stay for dinner at a friend's house once when I was a kid. His mother brought out a roast chicken and some sliced bread, placed them in the middle of the table, and the whole family ate it with their hands, pulling pieces off and putting them in the bread. I found that a bit odd. Story 33. I really had no idea what I was eating, other than some orange-colored boiled cabbage and mystery meat. Everything was orange. Then I had a big old scoop of mayonnaise on top of it. Couldn't eat it. It was just too repulsive. I avoided the mayonnaise and nibbled some cabbage, then said, "Boy, I'm stuffed, thanks." Story 34. When my partner and I started dating, I was a pretty picky eater. His parents were having people over for dinner and asked him what I liked to eat. He let them know that one of the few vegetables I liked was carrots. While true, I only like them prepared specific ways. Even now, I either eat them raw or they need to be cooked to complete softness, like in a soup. Something about the flavor and texture when they are steamed or only partially cooked is unpleasant to me. Of course, they steamed carrots, added some butter and cinnamon, and baked them just for me. I choked down 2 servings because I felt bad that they tried, but I hated the result. Thankfully, as I became less picky, the carrots stopped making appearances at family dinners. Story 35. I once went to a friend's house to eat, but the food was not good. The macaroni was soggy, the peas were mushy, and the chicken tasted like wood. Story 36. Okra. I never had it before because I am from Germany. I kept it in my mouth but could not make myself swallow it. I excused myself, spat it in the toilet, and called my mother the next day. I said, "Somebody made slugs and called it a vegetable." Story 37. In a nod to my Irish heritage, a friend made me lamb stew for St. Patrick's Day. I am pretty boring. Beef, chicken, turkey, and ham only. No duck, rabbit, or lamb. I tried to hide it under the vegetables and did a poor job of that. Story 38. My ex-girlfriend's grandmother made spaghetti with sour cream. Keep in mind, I hate sour cream. I had to eat it, or her grandmother would be offended. I am not joking. I just swallowed it without chewing. I didn't even hesitate for a second, and I ate it like Goku. Story 39. When I was a little kid, my uncle's wife made lunch for my brother and me. She had a degenerative joint disorder from a young age, so even by her late 40s, she walked with a walker. For some reason, we were left with her for babysitting, and she decided to make us hamburgers for lunch. She then proceeded to microwave the raw hamburgers. They were not even remotely cooked in the middle. Being too young to understand food safety, me around 8, him 5, my brother and I ate some of them, though only about half of what we could stomach. When we mentioned it to my grandmother, who raised us, she simply said, "Well, Aunt doesn't usually cook. You have to allow for her." Story 40. Went to visit my wife's grandmother who lived a few hours away from us. She was in her 90s and, while living independently, she no longer cooked for herself and relied on a meal delivery program. In her desire to be a good hostess, she abstained from eating several meals so that she could provide us dinner when we arrived. Between the guilt and sense of obligation, I choked down something worse than a 1980s dark brown packaged meal ready to eat, which prior to this event I thought to be impossible. I think it was some sort of animal protein with a gravy-like sauce to obscure its origins, with a side of sauerkraut. Story 41. I was in Albania when a family invited me to stay in their home. They were very poor. They fed me cow lung in spoiled yogurt sauce. I swallowed it quickly to be done with it, and they thought I loved it, so they gave me more. Story 42. My sister-in-law is a vegan, and she makes a meatloaf with ketchup as a paste on top. Tastes like eating straight ketchup. She also makes jackfruit pulled pork, which is very sweet. I only eat a little because the sweetness makes me feel like throwing up if I eat too much. Story 43. I was rewarded with chicken hearts, livers, and gizzards after helping my high school friend shovel out their parents' goat barn. Story 44. I went to a friend's house in 5th grade for dinner. They had burgers so rare they were practically twitching. My dad always overcooked our burgers, but that was what I was used to. Thank goodness they had pickles and ketchup. I would still rather have well done than rare when it comes to ground meat. I learned too much about what can be in meat from biology class. Story 45. Rice pudding with raisins. I was dating a man, And this was his mother's cooking. It was hard to eat. Story 46. Horse meat. I was in France on a student exchange, and it was made by my host family's grandmother. I remember it had no sides, no seasoning, and no sauce. Just a rectangular slab of meat on a plate. Tasted like blood. Story 47. Sweet potatoes cut into small pieces and swallowed whole. I cannot stand sweet potatoes, and these were canned. Story 48. Opossum one time and raccoon another time. Both are unpleasant. And do not tell me it is about how you prepare it. Story 49. Not a house, but a sandwich swap and potluck. I accepted an egg salad sandwich from an older couple, thinking it would be like chopped up hard-boiled eggs with some mayonnaise. It was really runny, very runny. I am not great with eggs to begin with, and the texture was very off-putting. I fought a gag reflex with every watery bite. Story 50. Not the worst food, but I had lasagna at someone's house. It tasted quite good. But the indigestion during the 3-hour ride home was the worst I have ever experienced. Story 51. My husband's stepfather makes toast triangles with really thinly sliced pear and melted dulce latte cheese. He is very proud of them. They are the fancy pre-dinner bites he prepares. I dislike blue cheese, but for him, I ate one because he is so proud, and I cannot bear to hurt his feelings. I could not manage the second one, and while his back was turned, I spat it into a napkin. Story 52. Fish soup. Cold. With a hangover. Learned a hard lesson that day. Story 53. Bless her heart, she died many years ago, but my mother's friend from work could not cook. She made some baked spaghetti with Kraft cheese slices on top. She did not see the day her name became an insult, thank goodness. Story 54. Undercooked chicken, or at least it was pink, was served at the house of a new boyfriend. His mother cooked it, and we all had to eat it sitting at the table. Story 55. I moved to Japan, and my new landlady invited me over for tea. She served small fancy cakes that were wrapped. I unwrapped one and discovered mold on one side. I ate around the mold but did not mention it to her. The next day, she apologized because she saw the moldy cake piece I had left behind and was mortified. Story 56. I spilled my coffee on the wooden floorboards in the bedroom. I did not have a towel, so I ate about 3 inches of the floorboard before they saw me and told me to stop. Story 57. A coworker invited me over. They live in the country in the middle of nowhere, and we were all hanging out outside. My coworker's husband smoked meat all day. He killed a rattlesnake, walked over to show us, and played with the rattle. He went inside and pulled apart the meat with his bare hands. Story 58. It was pasta with tuna, sweet corn, and mayonnaise. The food was not bad, but she decided to change her baby's diaper as she served the food right there on the table. As a result, the food then tasted unpleasant. Luckily, I was in good shape at the time, so I used the excuse that I should not finish it because it had too many calories. I still cannot look at that dish. Story 59. Kimchi. A new Korean coworker invited me over for dinner, and of course his Korean wife cooked her family kimchi recipe. It was absolutely horrendous, easily the worst tasting thing I have ever had. She was so nice, cute, and hopeful. They both sat across the table from me, smiling and wide-eyed, waiting to hear how much I loved the kimchi. Yummy. Luckily, the tears of pain did not give me away. Story 60. Prosciutto. The texture made me gag, but I forced it down. Story 61. I was on a road trip with a friend and we stopped at his grandparents' house so they could visit and we could shower. Grandma made a ham loaf similar to meatloaf but with ham. I think she put the ham in a blender. It didn't really bind like meatloaf and was more like salty, wet cat food. Story 62. A huge, rare marbled, and I assume expensive steak. I don't usually eat steak, but when I do, I prefer smaller, lean, medium well cuts. I almost got sick on the fatty parts. Story 63. Bit of a story, but it was a strawberry bavarois. I had been invited to a colleague's home for drinks, I thought. My roommate was a great cook and decided to cook us a delicious 3-course meal before I left. I ate it all. I arrived at my colleague's home to find I had actually been invited to a formal dinner. I can't remember what the entree and main course were, but I remember every mouthful of the very sweet strawberry bavarois. I felt obliged to make a decent dent in it because I didn't want to offend the hosts. It wasn't that bad, just too much given the circumstances. I was very lucky I didn't vomit. Story 64. A soggy pork rind gordita. I was being watched while trying it by the cook and I held back my vomit. I washed it down with my caramel cold brew. The taste mixed in my mouth with the soggy pork rind stuck in my teeth. I felt nauseous several times that night and was afraid I would have food poisoning. Story 65. One time a friend made us a meal. It was a meatloaf and she added lime juice to it. It was putrid. I remember the feeling of choking that down and saying thank you. But God, that was very unpleasant. Story 66. Lamb. I do not eat beef or pork, but I was not told what they were serving on New Year's Eve. I did not have the heart to turn it down. I ate as little as possible and forced myself to vomit while in their downstairs toilet. Story 67. As a teenager, Turkey Day dinner at new friends' houses of my parents. I managed 1.5 bites of a hideous Yankee-style stuffing. No sage, no cornbread, but lots of strange nuts, weird berries, and a really horrid seasoning. I loathed it. So did my mom, and she made that face at me. Don't say a word. After my half bite. Story 68. When I was dating my husband, we would sometimes have dinner with his family. I never knew if I would like what they were serving, so I would always eat a lot of the salad just in case. This gave me time to digest until the third course, which was meat if I didn't like the second course, pasta, or be full enough to just eat the pasta and pick at the third course. Later, when my parents had dinner with them and they brought out the salad, his mom said, "I know you like salad, so I made extra." And my mom looked at me puzzled because I rarely ate it at home. Then I had to explain to her. Story 69. My old roommate. I thought she knew how to cook. I had never seen her cook before, but this was the first and last time. She served me half-cooked fish drizzled with raspberry vinaigrette. I thought, what exactly are you trying to make? I would do that as a salad, but this was literally the fish drowned in it. She had some sort of vegetable side and sprinkled lots of walnuts and cheese on random sides that most people wouldn't eat. Story 70. I was served 10 plain donuts and sour cream for lunch in Ukraine. I ate them all to be polite. Since I finished my plate completely, I was served another 10 donuts. Story 71. Chip beef gravy probably tasted worse because I was expecting sausage gravy with the biscuits. Story 72. My mind always goes back to the Honey Boo Boo show where Mama June made spaghetti with ketchup and fake butter in a tub. Story 73. Scrap soup my ex's grandfather made. Essentially just leftovers with too much garlic. Turned into a soup with chunks of the leftover food inside. Absolutely vile, but they all ate it like it was the best thing ever. Story 74. Generally, people I visit have good food. If I do not like it, I will say so. I also bring my own seasonings with me in case there is no flavor. Story 75. Went to a friend's house in primary school in England. His mother announced dinner was ready, and it was a strange layered potato dish that was very greasy. I also fell out with him later because he never flushed the toilet after number 2 when we shared a chalet in Morecambe Pontins during Cubs. Story 76. Thankfully, throughout my life, my family has hosted about 99% of the time. I went to friends' houses to watch very rarely compared to how often they came to mine, but it was probably just some low-quality grilled meat or something sometime. Story 77. When student teaching in Australia, the teachers had us try the yeast extract spread. It was very unpleasant. I had to spit it into a napkin. Story 78. Had some bad catfish once. We were told how many they caught and the recipe they used to make them. Mexican catfish. Go figure. Story 79. I was about 10 years old, at a friend's house whose dad was an attorney and was on his second wife. At my house, we ate quite simply, as we did not have much. Anyway, she decided to make my friend and me lunch. Soup to start, vichyssoise. I did not know it would be cold on top of being horrible. I almost reflexively spit it out. The rest of the meal was similar in nature but not as bad. That soup, though, was terrible. It was like something you would give prisoners of war. Story 80. Scrambled eggs with the sour and tangy hollandaise sauce dripped all over it. The sausage was half-cooked. It looked good, but I could barely eat it. Story 81. My sister-in-law's tomato sauce would upset my stomach. I always avoided it after figuring that out. Then, at one summer barbecue, I realized her potato and macaroni salads were the same. They didn't taste good at all. I think her spice cabinet contained only a jar of salt and very old pepper. Story 82. Bologna salad sandwiches with homemade chicken noodle soup. Bologna salad, enough said. The soup was watery, and the vegetables were not fully cooked. Served by my dear mother-in-law. Story 83. One Easter. My brother was eating my grandmother's quiche when he said there was hair in it. My dad told him it was rude to point it out and to just eat around it. A little while later, my dad pulled hair out of his mouth. Others had the same issue. We discovered that my grandmother had dropped some cheese on the floor while making it. She had a cat, and the cheese must have landed on the cat's fur in her kitchen. She did not bother to rinse it off. Story 84. When I was a child, my parents and I visited distant family in a remote rural area. They asked me if I wanted cookies and milk, so I said of course. The cookies were okay, but the milk was fresh from a cow and tasted unpleasant. From the first sip, I disliked it. However, my parents raised me to be polite, so I drank it. Story 85. Those eggs had a fully formed dead bird inside. I was so polite and wanted to eat it quickly to be done with it that she actually gave me a second one. She liked me very much indeed. I had never used so much salt before. Story 86. Insanely undercooked chicken and those angel cakes use sugar with strawberries. Except they used salt by mistake. Story 87. My ex-boyfriend's mother prepared the food. I am grateful that she made the meal, but I would not choose to have it again. I still do not understand how she could make watery guacamole that was tasteless. The way she arranged the food combined hard textures with no softness and lacked flavor. It was a distortion of Mexican cuisine that I could not get through. I am a fan of the cuisine. Story 88. Stewed pork, cooked on a hot plate in a brown sauce and served over rice. It was not cleaned very well and had an unpleasant taste. I have had something similar with beef that had a mild grassy flavor. I would eat that one again, but never pork. Story 89. My ex, when we were together, invited me to her house for dinner with her parents. They made salad and beef burgers. There was no seasoning on the beef burgers whatsoever, not even salt and pepper. It was just bread and a beef patty, no ketchup, nothing. I was going to ask for some ketchup, but my ex kicked me under the table, so I guess that would have offended them. The salad was lettuce, cucumber, and some mixed vegetables. Again, there was no seasoning or salad dressing of any kind. They were just washed, cut up, and added. It was probably the driest food I have ever eaten in my entire life. It was like eating sand. It made a lot more sense why my ex was so amazed by the amount of seasoning I used when I cooked for her. I ate the whole thing and thanked them. It has been nearly 10 years, and I still think about that meal from time to time. Story 90. Had bobo tie at a South African colleague's. The combination of meat and banana was something I had never tried before and do not want to try again. Story 91. I secretly referred to it as the nothing casserole. It seemed to consist of rice and cheese or something similar, but whatever they mixed in, it was incredibly bland. To me, it literally tasted like nothing. What was worse is that other people eating it said, "This stuff is addictive." Story 92. My mother-in-law's cooking, which she traveled 4 hours with, arrived the day before we ate and was said to be kept on ice in their hotel. It was not ice. The food was simply kept in cooler bags. I don't know if there had been ice at some point, but there certainly was no ice when I unloaded the food into my refrigerator and noticed it was at room temperature. She kept putting food on my plate, and I became exactly as sick as you would expect from hearing this story. Story 93. Undercooked chicken caused me to be sick and vomit throughout the night. It was an unpleasant experience. Story 94. When I was a kid, my friend's mom asked me if I wanted a grilled cheese sandwich. She was such a sweet lady, like a second mom, so I said yes. When she gave me the sandwich a few minutes later, it was a grilled cheese with mayonnaise with a fairly large amount. When I was a kid, I hated mayonnaise. Now I can stand it on a chicken sandwich or something, but it took everything I had to choke that slimy thing down. Story 95. My grandmother, who was an unpleasant woman, had a strange habit of keeping food until it was unrecognizable, then telling you to microwave it for a few minutes to make it safe to eat. She also used leftovers as ingredients for other meals. An example I remember clearly: there were onions in the green beans from 2 weeks ago. The pasta sauce needed onions, so she used the onions from the green beans since they were about to spoil. This resulted in moldy green beans in the pasta sauce. When you visited, the rules were: eat what you could tolerate, pretend to eat the rest, wait until she got up to start cleaning, then scrape all the food back into the aluminum pan, which was immediately taken to the outside dumpster. We would get fast food afterward. Story 96. My grandmother turning on her oven was asking too much. Banquet frozen chicken from a box and a tray of frozen scalloped potatoes was haute cuisine for her. That was her idea of Thanksgiving. I couldn't even take a picture of her without her mouth hanging open and green spinach dribbling down her chin. Shameful slob. Story 97. My grandmother used to make buttermilk chicken. It was literally unseasoned chicken with the skin on, fully covered in buttermilk and put in the oven. The chicken meat was somehow dry every time, but the skin was like a soggy, rubbery layer of congealed fat. I have never experienced anything else like it. -10 out of 10, cannot recommend. I had to eat it because of food insecurity as a child, but no matter how hungry I was, I could not eat that skin. Story 98. Blackened burnt turkey one Thanksgiving. Thank goodness the mashed potatoes and gravy were not prepared by the hostess, as they made small bits of turkey swallowable. Even the dogs refused the turkey, and no one took seconds. Story 99. Porcupine. When I visited my son in Cameroon, Africa, while he was in the Peace Corps, God invited me to the chief's hut. I had to eat that. Story 100. My uncle's wife made the worst shrimp fried rice I have ever had. I was hungry and did not want to be rude, so I quietly ate it and just said thank you. Story 101. One of my friends growing up had a family tradition of putting a sunny-side-up egg on blueberry pancakes. They all really loved it. The pancakes were drenched in butter and syrup. I didn't have the heart to tell them I preferred my pancakes without eggs. They made it every time I stayed there, and they were all so happy about it. Now that I'm an adult, it probably wouldn't bother me, but as a kid, I couldn't eat runny eggs. Story 102. Hot dogs. I cannot stand the smell or the taste of them. I had a bite and then said I was full. They then put the plate on the floor for the dog to finish them off. Story 103. A colleague with whom I used to share my sunflower seeds once gave me a raw sausage rolled up in a leaf. Every other colleague seemed to like it, but I had trouble eating it. However, I still ate it out of respect for each other's culture. Story 104. As a teenager, I was at a friend's house and her mother had made some Polish soup which seemed to be very popular there. It had a very special taste, and I was on the verge of throwing up. I finished it. Her mother said she knew the soup was not for everyone and that I did not have to eat it. I said I loved it. Story 105. Homemade pizza was undercooked and the sauce tasted unpleasant. Story 106. When I visited China, we ate at a fancy restaurant. Apparently, some kind of moth larva stir-fried in sauce is a delicacy. To be honest, they knew it was not going to be for me and said they would not be insulted if I did not eat it. My wife even warned me against it because she does not eat it either. Well, I tried it. The taste was not bad, but I had to stop after eating too because of the pop of the abdomen when you bite into it. I just could not handle it. Story 107. Boiled cabbage. The scent was horrendous, and the taste was even worse. Story 108. My friend's husband made her a special dinner for her birthday and invited just 3 of her best friends. I smiled and ate every bite of the saltiest steak, lobster, rice, and green beans I have ever had in my life. I drank 3 glasses of water just at dinner. I thanked them and then did not eat salt for a week. Story 109. I was a picky child. My family would make me sit at the table for hours and try to force me to eat. I couldn't stand mashed potatoes, which are one of my favorites now, but my sweet grandmother wanted me to eat them. She was upset that I wouldn't touch anything. She grabbed a huge spoonful of applesauce, put it on my potatoes, and made me eat some. It was so disgusting that I got sick and wouldn't look at mashed potatoes again until I was an adult. Story 110. I can count myself quite lucky, having read some truly horrific stories here. A few minor offenses, though. My aunt's severely undercooked lasagna on Christmas Day. She worked the morning shift at a local bar, so she couldn't be home before noon to cook, but she insisted we all have Christmas lunch at their place, 20 miles away, while my parents lived literally across the street from her job. She served a lasagna that probably needed at least an extra 15 minutes. I don't mind slightly al dente pasta, but I draw the line when the lasagna sheet is still crunchy. Too bad, because the sauce was good. A friend's wife cooked one of the special dishes from her country. Chicken soup. Soup with pieces of boiled chicken. Exactly as tasty as you imagine it. Warm salty water with a few sad pieces of vegetables and vaguely slimy bits of chicken. My grandmother, God bless her soul, once fried a cordon bleu in vinegar instead of in oil. I could smell something was wrong, but she insisted it was oil and the recipe was meant to be like that. I didn't eat it, as we later agreed it wasn't edible. My Canadian roommate once tried making a chocolate cake. She forgot a slightly important ingredient, baking powder, so the cake didn't rise and had the specific weight of a block of brown concrete. To her credit, it did taste good, but nobody could manage more than 2 bites. Story 111. I really hate raw tomatoes, and I was served a bowl of gazpacho, a cold puree of raw tomatoes. Story 112. My Polish husband's grandmother served meatloaf. It was cold and sliced like luncheon meat. My father-in-law advised me never to eat it because it contained all the undesirable parts of the whole animal. Story 113. One summer was the best my girlfriend and I ever had. We watched Titanic, and it did not make us sad. I took her to Best Buy. She took me home to meet her mother and father. Her mother cooked meatloaf even though I do not eat meat. I loved her so much, I took some for the team. Her father was silent. His eyes were fixed on what was on television. Story 114. Cow tongue and anchovy salad. The first night at my host family's house in France. I got slightly drunk on wine because I was swallowing them whole. Story 115. Any meal my roommate made using tap water. She cooked with it constantly, and one day I suggested and showed her me using bottled water for cooking. She exclaimed that she always just uses tap water and nobody notices, to which I told her I definitely do notice. A while after, I noticed she used tap water to make some spaghetti. After forcing myself to eat, she informed me again that she used tap water and everyone loved the food. I told her again that I noticed. Now, every time she cooks, she offers me food as well, of course, and for some reason, I never remember about the water until right after I agree or after I take my first bite and taste it. I can always taste it. I feel too bad or rude to say anything, so I never have. But it hurts eating it. Not just the taste, but what's going into my body. Sometimes our tap water is anything but clear water. Story 116. Cold, unseasoned collard greens. The family was Seventh-day Adventist and did not eat pork. They also did not work on the Sabbath, so no heating up the food either. I had not had collard greens before. I thought they were cooked spinach, which I like with a little vinegar. I have made collard greens since then without pork, and they are pretty good if you season them. These could not have been seasoned. Better. I ate them though. Story 117. A plate of plain spaghetti and a bottle of Heinz ketchup. No one else ate. All eyes were on me. The hosts were proud to be making me a meal from home. Story 118. My father-in-law was not aware that you need to either brine or season a turkey before cooking. He literally thought it, took it out of the bag, and put it in the oven. The turkey was dry, chewy, and tasteless. He was surprised when I told him you are supposed to brine a turkey. Yet, he insists on cooking Thanksgiving dinner every year. I mostly stick to the side dishes. Story 119. Mashed potatoes, the flaky kind from a box, with a lot of raw garlic, nearly raw green beans, and some meat with the texture of sole. It gave me food poisoning too. Story 120. Some kind of tofu or vegan lasagna, it was horrible. I would not eat it again for love or money. Story 121. My ex-mother-in-law's food was always inedible, no matter what it was. I saw what she did with chicken and never ate anything else in her house. She would take frozen chicken out of the freezer, thaw it halfway to take out a few pieces, and then refreeze what she wasn't using. It is a miracle I did not get food poisoning the few times I forced myself to eat her cooking. Why not just break the package into 2 or 3 pieces and freeze the portions individually? In my opinion, it was laziness combined with a total disregard for hygienic food handling. Story 122. Chicken heart goulash. I like goulash, but I dislike organ meat. It was my first visit to my husband's family, so I had to be polite. Story 123. A 2-inch thick frozen T-bone steak cooked in an electric skillet with half an inch of Crisco oil. After one bite, I gave up being polite. Story 124. These Danish chocolates have a chocolate covering with a bitter mashed potato filling inside. I did not expect the filling. The combination of chocolate and mashed potato does not taste good. Story 125. We ran into an old friend, and he wanted us to meet his wife, so we were invited to dinner. We were served basically raw chicken. Politeness does not extend to getting food poisoning, so we said we had already eaten. Our friend told his wife it was the best thing she had ever made. When I went to the bathroom, the tub was filled with laundry that had become smelly because it had not been dried quickly enough. She was using toothpaste to try to remove the smell. Story 126. Meeting my girlfriend's father for the first time. He barbecued steaks. Mine was huge with no seasoning. Nothing on it. I ate the whole thing. Story 127. I poured Rice Krispies, put a spoonful of sugar on it, and then took a big bite. That was not sugar in the bowl on the stove. It was salt. Yuck. I continued to eat it out of politeness until my now husband noticed. We all had a good laugh. Story 128. My mother-in-law once made squash soup with way too much cinnamon. My husband and I still joke about cinnamon soup. Story 129. Posel. My friend made some and I did not like it, but I forced myself to eat it all. Then she wanted to give me more and I had to tell her that I was so full. She kept insisting and I almost cried telling her no thank you. I did not like it at all. Story 130. Breaded fish. I absolutely hate seafood. My friend at the time had me over for a few hours, and I was on my way out the door. Her Polish mother insisted that I stay for dinner. She was a nice lady and meant well. This was during Lent, and she made breaded fish and mashed potatoes with no seasonings. We were not allowed to use condiments of any sort since it was Good Friday. The mashed potatoes were not even cooked with butter because the food had to be bland. I was very hungover since we had been at a college party the night before. Her father angrily glared at me the entire time. My neck was covered in hickeys, but I hid them with makeup and wore a scarf. He was a mean Polish drunk and did not like people eating his food in his home. He also did not like that I was not Polish. The fish was huge, and her mother would have been insulted if I did not eat the entire meal. She kept offering me more out of kindness, and I was probably turning green in the face. It was absolute torture, and I threw it all up once I left and went home. I never went to her house again after that. Story 131. Hot sugar water with an egg cracked into it and cooked. Imagine eggs Benedict cooked in sugar water. Something about that combination of taste and texture grossed me out, but I did my best to eat it because it was how the villagers in this tiny rural village in mainland China showed hospitality to guests. My family and I were visiting mainland China in the 2000s and ended up in a rural village in the mountains. We knew someone who managed a factory, and one of the workers there offered to take us to see his home village and meet his family. It was absolutely beautiful, with terraced rice fields carved into the mountains. The villagers were very hospitable, friendly, welcoming, and let us stay in their home. Story 132. Chitlins. If you do not know, look them up. Also spelled chitlins. Story 133. Reheated lukewarm soggy chicken wings with watery hot sauce. Story 134. My kindergarten best friend was Chinese American, and they fed me chicken feet when I came over to play. Scared me, but even then I knew to accept when someone shares their cultural food. Story 135. Ugh. Someone tried to make falafel for the first time. It was difficult. Story 136. Pickled jellyfish. I tried very hard to eat the dish made by elderly Chinese grandmothers, but I was dying inside. Story 137. Tofurkey at my American and vegetarian friend's house. I actually like tofu and eat it often, but this was very bland and pale. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.